He's Jeff Erickson from Rotowire.com, your one-stop shop for fantasy sports. Jeff is set up in one of the most picturesque, scenic views you're going to find anywhere, his backyard. And man, oh man, that looks like a gorgeous day in Southern California. Just ideal, right? Middle of October, couldn't ask for better.
Yeah, I got my palatial backyard here, and yeah, it's a Chamber of Commerce day though. 79 degrees is the high. It's beautiful.
Oh man, that's nice. Speaking of beautiful, for a lot of people right now, fantasy football season, I don't know if I would say it's been beautiful. It's been unexpected. It's been frustrating because sometimes you're just dealing with players whose values aren't exactly where they should be at this time of year. Guys are hurt, guys are underproducing. And then there are certain players that weren't even on the radar that are becoming fantasy gold.
Yeah, that's right. Scoring is down overall. Running back scoring in particular. I know after week 4, Saquon Barkley was the leading fantasy back. I think the number 1 back, and his score was the lowest number 1 running back score cumulative after 4 weeks since 1997. It's down quite a bit. We saw, a couple guys, have big games last week. Nick Chubb's been awesome all season long. Austin Eckler has really recovered his value despite losing their top left tackle, Rashawn Slater, out for the season. Matchups against Texas, the Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns probably had a lot to do with that, though.
I'll tell you what, I'm watching the Rams, and I feel bad for right now for everybody involved in that offense. That line can't do anything. You can't protect Stafford. You can't open up holes for the running game. Look, I know Cam Akers might not be what he was a couple of years ago pre-injury, but when there are no holes to run through and guys are just waiting to wrap you up as soon as you get the football, it's hard no matter who you are. Henderson, Akers, anybody right now to start producing on the ground in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, it's Kupp and that's it. Maybe Higbee, if you're really looking to have any sort of production from anyone there. I try not to start Stafford. I'm in a league, a super flex league, where I'm stuck with him. But because I'm not going to do any better. That's the problem, is off the waiver wire. Geno Smith, that train has come and gone. I mean, you can't pick him up anymore in a super flex league. I'd start him over Stafford if I had him, but I just don't have that chance.
So you said the train is gone now for Geno. Where is the train still available right now? What stops are left if there are certain guys that you could say, get them now, because in a week or two, they're going to be gone?
Well, at quarterback, it's pretty slim, but Kenny Pickett, maybe, coming off a game against Buffalo where they got blown out, but he had the volume, and they had a couple 4th downs in Bills territory where they failed. They had another instance there where they settled for the field goal where it looked like Deontay Johnson got both feet down. They overruled it ultimately there. That could have been a touchdown drive. They missed 2 field goals. In other words, there was points left on the field, basically. And again, a tough match began this week against the Bucs, but he might still produce a little bit there. So you can still find him in places, although not so much in super flex leagues, but single quarterback leagues. At least you'd have an alternative to Stafford.
Yeah, you're right. And by the way, from a fantasy standpoint, Tom Brady has not been good as a whole, but last week he was really good. And of course, that would be the week I sat him on my bench and played another quarterback in his place. So
last 2 weeks, the volume has been there for Brady and some decent production. Remember, against the Chiefs, they were playing catch up there, and they just abandoned the run completely. Only 6 rushing attempts in that game. So, the last 2 weeks have been better, and it coincides with Godwin getting back on the field. I don't think they're going to have Julio again this week, but they're slowly getting a little healthier. Perriman looks like he'll be able to play. But Evans has been healthy. He's had that 1 week where he was suspended, and that really hurt the Bucs passing game too.
The Dolphins were a great story early on. Then everybody got hurt. And last week, once the Jets defense got a hold of them, minus Teddy Bridgewater, it was all downhill. And I'm trying to figure out, if you own Dolphin players, are you just waiting for Tua to come back? Is that pretty much the game plan right now?
Or at least Bridgewater. I mean, we got one play with Bridgewater. In the Thursday night game, remember when Tua got hurt, Bridgewater actually was pretty decent, and they didn't shy away from their packages once they brought Bridgewater in. But once Skylar Thompson was in, it's a completely different story. It's a very conservative approach. The deep ball was pretty much gone at that point in time. Didn't help that Smythe had that big drop that could have led to a possible touchdown drive when the game was still close. At that point, it was still 19-17. The Jets ultimately stopped him and forced a long field goal attempt, which missed. And then they got 3 quick touchdowns in the fourth quarter. That could have been a different game.
Jeff, when it comes to Jamar Chase, he's been good, not great. He hasn't, been excellent except for week one. Do you think he'll get better as the season moves along, or get more explosive? Or do you think this is kind of where
Bengals have a real problem right now? They can't solve the too high shell, too high safeties shell defense there. They're just not being, they haven't found a way to crack it downfield, and Chase has been affected the most by that. You saw him, he was a check down artist last week. It didn't help. Higgins missed most of that game, and he was a decoy even when he was on. Higgins hasn't practiced this week, by the way. So I think it might be a little bit more problematic this particular week against the Saints. I think they figure it out eventually, but it's going to require some patience this week. I think Chase will get there on volume for you. I think he'll probably even score, but I don't expect him to get loose on any big plays.
We were just talking earlier to one of our guys, Lee Sterling from Paramount. He was talking about the disaster that is the Russell Wilson contract right now. And he wonders if this is going to put Denver in a hole for the next 4 to 5 years. If you own Russell Wilson in fantasy, you've probably either benched him or cut him by now. Does he have anything left in the tank, or is this potentially just a catastrophic situation for Denver?
I want to see what happens, like with the shoulder. Like, how much has that been a problem? Was it more than just these 2 weeks, or was it just these 2 weeks where he's dealing with that? I wouldn't cut him. I probably would try to avoid to start him this week too. It's a kind of a quick reshuffle league. Things happen in a hurry, but yeah, he looks pretty bad right now. This could, I think, your previous guess was right. I think it could be a bad long-term situation.
Now, you've got Courtland Sutton ranked 13th in your value meter this week, which is his primary target against the Chargers. And then Jerry Jeudy is a little farther down, 25th. So the question is, if they fall behind against the Chargers, they're going to have to put the ball in the air, which is why you would think guys like Sutton and Jeudy could have some value.
Yeah, I might still downgrade those guys. I want to see what happens in practice with Wilson. He was limited today. Keep in mind they play on Monday, so I have a little bit more time to make that decision. But those guys might be worthy of a downgrade if we get bad news. In fact, probably, just saying it sounds wrong, right? If we're that down on Wilson, we probably shouldn't have 2 guys in the top 25 among the receivers.
Meanwhile, speaking of receivers, you've got A.J. Brown ranked 4th against the Cowboys defense, and you got CeeDee Lamb ranked 16th against the Eagles defense. This is interesting for me because Dallas's D has been really, really good with Dak out. So I'm interested to see what Philly's offense can do. And CD has been one of the primary, if not the primary target for Cooper Rush over the last 4 weeks. So interested to see if those rankings change heading into the big one come Sunday night.
Well, Lamb seems like a good candidate to go over Courtland Sutton, who we just talked about. I could see that happening. Hurts is playing at a better level than Rush. I mean, the Cowboys are winning, but it's not because of Cooper Rush. He's just a game manager. Mm-hmm. It's not like he's passing all over the place. I think Hurts could be in line for a pretty decent game. Now, the question is, will they have their left tackle Jordan Mailata, who missed last week against Arizona? I think that's a big factor in this game because obviously the Cowboys pass rush has been their best component so far.
When Dak comes back, do you think they're going to stick to the script they've been doing with Rush, or do you think they're going to go back to letting Dak throw the ball like he did pre-injury?
I don't think it'll be like same pre-injury levels because I think they're going to want to try to protect him a little bit. And I do think that there's some concerns about can they, survive in shootouts. I think they're better off in close games and let the defense take over. I mean, they do have 2 solid running backs. One thing I will say is they've got a lot more mileage out of Smith at left tackle ever since Tyron Smith got hurt. We were worried about that position, and he's graded out pretty well. So that's one of the things that's been a pleasant surprise on offense for them.
Jeff Erickson talks fantasy sports with us every week at this time, and we're fortunate enough to be able to have Jeff Zoom from outside, which, by the way, if you remember any time last time during COVID, we started Zooming more with Jeff. It was a terrific, terrific view. We loved it. We went back to the phones, and I said, you know what? Let's get back to Zooming. You sound great, clear as day, and you got a beautiful view. I mean, inside, outside, I don't care. It's perfect. The wireless connection is good, so all is well right now, Jeff. And I'm telling you, I don't know if you do any of these Zooms for Rotowire from outside, but if not, you need to start incorporating that. It's pretty nice.
I might. Yeah, I might. I'm getting my vitamin D. It's good. I
Hey,
need to breathe some fresh air. Just as long as the gardener next door isn't too loud, we're good.
all right. Well, if they are too loud, don't worry. We sometimes get the vacuum cleaner at the 6 o'clock hour of the show, so
Nice.
we
Always
just
nice.
incorporate it. It's part of the ambiance of doing live radio, right? That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Give me your thoughts on tonight's Thursday night matchup. It starts in less than an hour. Chicago and Washington. Are there any plays? Let's put it this way. I picked up Jerry Jeudy in a league, in a guillotine league, ad drops today, and immediately subbed him in for Mooney of Chicago, who it's hard to trust on a week-to-week basis. Are there any Bears or Commanders you like in this one?
I mean, I could see Mooney being okay because the Commanders' secondary is pretty awful. William Jackson III has been a colossal bust. Didn't even make the trip. He got benched in the second half last week. They slapped an injury tag on him, but Brian Robinson's getting the start for the Commanders. I feel almost tempted to play under props on that. I don't think I wasn't terribly impressed so far. I think it's a great story, but I'm not sure this is a good matchup here. I mean, I think both defenses are pretty good for streaming options in fantasy this week. Uh, yeah, David Montgomery. I like David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. I think they'll be able to run the ball pretty effectively against the Commanders. I don't think there'll be a whole lot of passing. I don't know. It's one of those games where everybody is predicting an under, and the under's already set at 38, so it's almost impossibly low. But watch it be 30 to 25 or something, just to stymie us a little bit.
And I'm sure Mooney's going to go out for over 100 yards and a couple touchdowns because I'm benching him this week. But it's hard when a guy like that gives you the home run play, but he's not that possession receiver like so many others are. It's either boom or bust almost weekly.
Exactly.
All right. Let's talk about some of the other big matchups this week. I noticed, and I'm looking at the value meter right now and how you have everybody ranked. We talked about A.J. Brown ranked 4th. You've also got Marquise Brown ranked 9th this week for Arizona, going up against Seattle, and right above him is DK Metcalf. So you think Metcalf and Brown will both have big games in that one?
Oh yeah, this is the game outside of KC Buffalo I'm looking forward to the most from a fantasy perspective. It's a shame that they're on at the same time and obviously KC Buffalo is the marquee game of the season, let alone this week. But this is Seattle games are appointment fantasy television in a way because they're pretty efficient offensively and they can't stop anybody. So I expect big numbers on both sides of the ball. I think this is a good week for Kyler Murray to get well. I think if you go out, I think the pickup of the week, if you can't get Kenneth Walker, and he's only available in about 50% of the leagues, and that probably is skewed heavily towards leagues that are smaller or less active. But I like Benjamin on the other side of this contest. James Conner didn't practice yet this week. He's got bad ribs. Darrell Williams is already out. They put another guy, Ward, on the IR. The backups now for Benjamin are Keontae Ingram, who hasn't been active yet this week, and 2 guys off the practice squad. So I think Benjamin is going to get a lot of work, and this is a great matchup against Seattle. So I think he's a sneaky play, DFS and season long wise.
Tough 2 weeks for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jeff. But what do you think about guys like Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk going into this week against the Colts?
It's so hard with these Jaguars because, I thought last week was a smash spot for James Robinson and he couldn't get untracked at all. They lost their left guard in that game. I think that's a little underrated, but also Travis Etienne outsnapped Robinson. So I actually am kind of low key big on Etienne this week. I think he's you treat him like a rookie running back where he's getting more playing time over the course of the season. Obviously missed all of last year. As far as Lawrence and Kirk go, it's tough. It's pretty tough. I think the Colts are actually a reasonably difficult team defensively to face. I think Lawrence regressed badly. I mean, he made some bad decisions last week against the Texans. His throws were sailing high in other instances. You can't blame the weather conditions last week like you could in Philly the week before. So I'm a little lukewarm on those guys this week.
Let's talk about some of your favorite plays this week. I've noticed that Ramondre Stevenson has jumped up to 7th right now on the value meter after that big game last week against Detroit. No reason why, if you're New England, you wouldn't keep running your horse, right?
Yeah, not only that, but Cleveland's been terrible against the run the last 2 weeks. You remember 2 weeks ago, Atlanta ran 11 plays in a row for a drive and a half. Very effectively, Austin Eckler went for a ton of yards last week, and Kelly ran well when Eckler needed a breather. So I really think Stevenson's going to have a big game this week. Keep in mind, Damian Harris is hurt. Has had 2 limited practices, but earlier reports suggested he might miss multiple weeks. So I wonder if they are listing him as limited just as some of this little New England subterfuge. I don't think Harris plays at all.
Who are some of your other favorite plays this week?
Now I think you always are looking to find specific matchups. So for instance, Melvin Gordon, I know he was a little limited in practice today, but I think he's actually probably a decent play against the Chargers, another team that's has trouble stopping the run. That's another thing I kind of like a little bit there. I like Hayden Hurst against the Saints, especially if Higgins doesn't play. I think he's the guy that benefits a little bit from that. I think he's a top 10 tight end this week. And tight end's just a nasty, nasty position right now, too. If you don't have one of the big two guys, or you didn't stumble into Taysom Hill last week, I mean, it's been really problematic. Watch out for Raheem Mostert on the Dolphins. Returned to a full practice today, sat out Wednesday. I think it's kind of more of a rest day than anything else, but he's really taken over in that backfield for Miami.
I spent a high pick on Kyle Pitts, thinking it was going to be a breakout for him at tight end, and I'm just hating it right now. The injury didn't help, but even when he was healthy, he wasn't racking up the kind of yards and big games like you expected.
Oh, for sure. I've got him in places and recommended him to everyone. It's one of the biggest surprises of the season, but they really just don't want to expose Marcus Mariota. They do not want him throwing that much. They want almost max protection all the time. They're asking Pitts to block more. And for a while, they were 2-2 and going into last week, they came back late against the Bucks, and then had that horrible roughing the passer call. Now, I don't know if they would have driven the length of the field to score. They had a net 110 passing yards last week, if you account for sacks. So it wasn't exactly like they were tearing it up offensively. You can't really justify the decision from that standpoint, but Arthur Smith is probably playing it like that because that gives them their best chance to win, is this tight, close to the best game. We may gnash our teeth and hate it, but it makes sense to them. So it might be a while before we see Pitts.
Let's talk about what you've got up on the website right now, rotowire.com. I'm on the fantasy football section. I noticed Dan Marcus on the NFL waiver wire with his deep dive for week 6, exploiting the matchups, your value meter. We've got the monkey knife fight, prop picks, a lot of stuff going on up as always, especially within the last 24 hours. You did a ton of articles up at RotoWire.
Yeah, we do. And, towards the end of the week, obviously that volume increases, especially for anything for DFS or gaming purposes as well. We cover a lot of different angles, a lot of different ways to play and enjoy our game.
Meanwhile, let's talk about baseball. It's never too early to start thinking about 2023, especially in dynasty and keeper leagues like a lot of us are in. Adrian and I play in the same league. We're starting to think about it right now. What are we like? How is the process for trying to evaluate player values for next season coming?
I'm taking a full week off this week, enjoying the playoffs. And then, although we did have a meeting and we're going to be talking about our process, trying to get the projections out earlier because, draft and hold leagues have already started. It's insane. We have a rudimentary set of rankings out there and we'll constantly update them, of course. I want to pay attention to a couple of things, the starting pitching, like how many go in the first 3 rounds, how early does the closer run start? I think it might start a little later this year after what happened this year. But, it's just because there's fewer and fewer saves among the top closers and fewer top closers. So I think, it's a tough spot to be in right now. And we're going to figure that out in conjunction with the new rules for next year.
Rotowire.com/free, 10 days. You don't even have to put a credit card down, Jeff, and you can enjoy everything you have to offer.
Yes, sir. Rotowire.com/free. No credit card required. Get that free trial and kick the tires. Hopefully you want to subscribe.
This was great. Enjoyed the conversation. We'll look forward to doing it again right back here with you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.